all of you. Hare Krishna to anyone tuning in on live Facebook, either now or watching it afterwards. Jai Radha 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 is Ki, Nitai Gaura Pramanande.
You got water, Chaitanya Vallabha?
Some water would be lovely. Yeah, thanks. So, we're going to read from the Bhagavad Gita, as it is. Chapter 4, Text 1. We'll just recite the invocation first. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So this is chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge, and this is text 1. So in this book it's page 215. Thanks, Eka.
Why are we back on chapter 4?
All will be revealed, don't fear.
Oh, right.
Because right now we're studying the Bhagavad Gita thematically.
Yeah.
We're not studying it chronologically.
Yeah, right.
So we're starting a new theme today.
Oh, right.
But don't worry, you're one step ahead of me. I was going to explain that, and I will. So don't worry. So, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Imam Vivasvate Yogam. Imam Vivasvate Yogam.
Imam Vivasvate Yogam.
Imam Vivasvate Yogam.
Imam Vivasvate Yogam.
Proktavan Aham Avyayam. Proktavan Aham Avyayam.
Proktavan Aham Avyayam.
Proktavan Aham Avyayam.
Proktavan Aham Avyayam.
Vivishvan Manave Praha. Vivishvan Manave Praha.
Vivishvan Manave Praha.
Vivishvan Manave Praha.
Vivishvan Manave Praha.
Manu Ikshvakave Bravit. Manu Ikshvakave Bravit. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Imam Vivasvate Yogam. Proktavan Aham Avyayam. Vivishvan Manave Praha. Mano Ikshvakave Bravit. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Imam Vivasvate Yogam. Proktavan Aham Avyayam. Vivishvan Manave Praha. Mano Ikshvakave Bravit. Gentlemen.
Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Imam Vivasvate Yogam. Proktavan Aham Avyayam. Vivishvan Manave Praha.
Mano Ikshvakave Bravit. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Imam Vivasvate Yogam. Proktavan Aham Avyayam. Vivishvan Manave Praha. Mano Ikshvakave Bravit.
Shri Bhagavan Vacha.
Shri Bhagavan Vacha.
Imam Vivasvate Yogam.
Imam Vivasvate Yogam. Proktavan Aham Avyayam.
Vivishvan Manave Praha.
Vivishvan Manave Praha.
Manu Ikshvakave Bravit.
Mano Ikshvakave Vishvakave Bhavit. Ladies.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Imam Vivashvate Yogam.
Imam Vivashvate Yogam.
Ruptavan Aham Avyayam.
Ruptavan Aham Avyayam.
Vivishvan Manave Praha.
Vivishvan Manave Praha.
Manur Ishvakave Bravit.
Manu Vishvakave Bhavit.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Imam Vivashvate Yogam.
Imam Vivashvate Yogam.
Proktavan Aham Avyayam.
Proktavan Aham Avyayam.
Vivashvan Manave Praha.
Vivashvan Manave Praha.
Manu Iksha Kave Bravit.
Manu Vishvakave Bhavit. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan
The
Uvacha.
Supreme Personality of Godhead said,
The Supreme Personality of God said,
Imam, this, Vivasvate,
Vivashvate,
unto the Sun God,
unto the Sun God,
Yogam, the science of one's relationship to the Supreme,
the science of one's relationship to the Supreme,
Proktavan, instructed,
Aham,
I, Avyayam, imperishable, Vivishvan, the Sun God's name, Manave, unto the Father of mankind, of the name Vaivasvata, Praha, told, Manu, the Father of mankind, Ikshvakave, unto King Ikshvaku, Abravit, said. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. The Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the Sun God, Vivishvan, and Vivishvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. Purport. Herein we find the history of the Bhagavad Gita, traced from a remote time when it was delivered to the royal order of all planets. Beginning from the Sun planet, the king of all planets are especially meant, the kings of all planets are especially meant for the protection of the inhabitants, and therefore the royal order should understand the science of Bhagavad Gita, in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from material bondage to lust. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge, in eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart the lesson to the citizens by education, culture and devotion. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the science of Krishna consciousness, so that the people may take advantage of this great science and pursue a successful path, utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. In this millennium, the Sun God is known as Vivishvan, the king of the sun, which is the origin of all planets within the solar system. In the Brahma Samhita 552 it is stated, Yat chaksho eva esha savita sakala grahanam raja samasta suramurtya ashesha teja yasya gyaya brahmati sambrita kala chakro govinda madi purusham tamaham bhajami. Let me worship, Lord Brahma said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who is the original person and under whose order the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the eye of the Lord and traverses its orbit in obedience to his order. The sun is the king of the planets, and the sun god, at present of the name Vivishvan, rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He is rotating under the order of Krishna. And Lord Krishna originally made Vivishvan his first disciple to understand the science of Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is not, therefore, a speculative treatise for the insignificant, mundane scholar, but is a standard book of knowledge coming down from time immemorial. In the Mahabharata, Shanti Parva 348.51 to 52, we can trace out the history of the Gita as follows. Treta Yuga Do Cha Tato Vivishran Manave Dado Manus Chalo Kabritjatan Sut Yakshva Kave Dado Ikshva Kuna Chakatito Vyapya Lokan Avastita. In the beginning of the millennium known as Treta Yuga, this science of the relationship with the Supreme was delivered by Vivishvan to Manu. Manu, being the father of mankind, gave it to his son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this earth planet and forefather of the Raghu dynasty, in which Lord Ramachandra appeared. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita existed in human society from the time of Maharaj Ikshvaku. At the present moment, we have just passed through 5,000 years of the Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. Before this, there was Dwapara Yuga, 800,000 years, and before that was Treta Yuga, 1,200,000 years. Thus, some 2,005,000 years ago, Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this planet Earth. The age of the current Manu is calculated to last some 305,300,000 years, of which 120,400,000 have passed. Accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by the Lord to his disciple, the sun god Vivishvan, a rough estimate is that the Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago. And in human society, it has been extant for 2 million years. It was re-spoken by the Lord again to Arjuna about 5,000 years ago. That is the rough estimate of the history of the Gita, according to the Gita itself, and according to the version of the speaker, Lord Sri Krishna. It was spoken to the sun god Vivishvan because he is also a Kshatriya, and the father of all Kshatriyas, who are descendants of the sun god, or the Surya Vamsa Kshatriyas, because Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas. Being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this knowledge is apurusheya, superhuman. Since the Vedic instructions are accepted as they are without human interpretation, the Gita must therefore be accepted without mundane interpretation. The mundane wranglers may speculate on the Gita in their own ways, but that is not Bhagavad Gita as it is. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is, from the disciplic succession, and it is described herein that the Lord spoke to the sun god spoke to his son Manu, and Manu spoke to his son Ikshvaku. Ammagyanitimirandasya gananjana shalakaya chakshuram militam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchikalpaturubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhyacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, as was correctly observed before we read the verse, we seem to have gone back in the Gita. Last time we had a verse, was last week, given by Rajendra Nandan Prabhu, and he spoke on chapter 18, text 66. Savadamam parichaja, mam ekam sharadam puja, ham tvam savapapibhyo makshayishami masuja. Abandon all varieties of religion, just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions, do not fear. So you may say, so why have we now jumped back to chapter 4? Of course, in one sense, the Bhagavad Gita is just like a nice cake. And anywhere you chop into it, it's tasty. But the reason that we're doing that is because right now we're studying the Bhagavad Gita thematically according to the verses from the Bhakti Shastri course and exam. So the previous theme that we were studying was called Levels of Knowledge. But this next theme is how to receive knowledge. How to receive that knowledge. So spiritual knowledge is known as Shruti. We spoke about this a few weeks ago, which means that which is heard. So hearing is one of the most important aspects of spiritual life. Actually, it's the basis of spiritual life, Shravana. And if we're not regularly hearing spiritual sound vibration, then after a very short time we'll start to realize that we're losing our taste to practice spiritual life. We're losing our determination. And we're losing our inspiration. So hearing is incredibly important. One devotee used to say, if you do not hear, then very soon you will not be here. If you do not hear, then eventually you will not be here. Because you'll lose your taste, you'll lose your determination, you'll lose your inspiration to practice spiritual life. And then you won't be performing devotional service with love and devotion. This is the most important aspect. Sometimes we forget that it's devotional service. And we say, have you done your service today? Or, I've got some service for you to do. It's not just service, because everyone's doing service. Even a worker is serving their boss. That's service. The policeman is serving the community. The Prime Minister is serving the state. But we don't just want to perform service, we want to perform devotional service. So therefore it has to be performed with love and devotion, or at least that's what we're trying to cultivate. So unless we're regularly hearing, then there'll be no love and devotion. It will turn into lust and commotion. In other words, we'll just be doing things just to get it done in the mode of passion, or we'll be doing things looking for some result or some recognition, some praise, or we're wanting something back. In commotion, there'll be no peace. It'll be just get it done as quick as possible. And then, lust and commotion further degrades into rust and corrosion. In other words, everything seizes up. So you try and pick up your bead bag, and you start your arms squeaking because you're rusty. Someone asks you to do some service and it's just like... So everything breaks down, rust and corrosion. Love and devotion, then lust and commotion, and then rust and corrosion. But what is the oil? Because, if you have, like when I used to have my old bike, if I didn't put something on the chain, if I didn't put oil on the chain, then it would get rusty and it would get stiff. So the oil that's really making everything move is this Shravanam. This is the essence. Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. If we're hearing and we're chanting, then we will be remembering Krishna. And in fact, there is one Vedic aphorism which says that do not try to see God with your eyes, but try to see God with your ears. In fact, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he even went so far as to say, do not try to see God, but try to act in such a way that God will be happy to see you. But the point is that we should try and see God through our ears. Now that sounds like a bit of an unusual thing. How do we do that? Like in the morning at Greet the Deities time, we sing these two verses from the Brahma Samhita. And the second one is speaking about how, because Krishna is absolute, therefore each one of his senses is interchangeable with another. So Krishna can eat with his ears. He can smell with his eyes, because Krishna is absolute. But we can also see through our ears. So how do we understand that? Just like if someone is explaining something to you, like if I ask Eka, how do you get to your house from here? And Eka will say, well, you come out of the end of Cottenham Street, you turn right, and then you go, and I'll say, oh, I see. And then he'll say, and then you walk to the end of the road, okay, I see. So when someone's explaining something to you, I can't see it, but by their explaining it to me, oh, I see. So therefore we learn to see God through the ears. But the point is that we have to hear from the right source. Because if we don't hear from the right source, just like sometimes we hear rumours, You know, you get gossip mongers. Even in the temple, we have some gossip mongers. I'm probably a gossip monger myself. And so sometimes we hear rumours. But what's the thing about rumours? Sometimes they're not correct. Or sometimes we may hear something from someone which is correct, but we change it. You know, we put our own little slant on it. We don't remember it correctly, so we say it's like this, you know. That's called Chinese whispers. And we're going to have a game of Chinese whispers just now, just to try and illustrate the point. So what you're going to have to do is, I'm going to first say the sentence to HG Caitanya Vallabha, and I'm not going to repeat it again, and I'm going to say it quite quietly. It's going to be quite quiet, a whisper in the ear, so no one else can hear it. And then you just have to then go and say it to the next person, like that. And we're going to see, when it gets back to Kamud, we're going to see what it comes out as. Now I'm going to have to think of something to say. Okay, come here, HG Caitanya. You are my disciple. I've been imparting some Chinese whispers.
It was long.
It was a bit long there. If you're watching at home on live now, live Facebook now, just chant amongst yourselves. We count how many people are out in room 1.
Okay.
It's not a Vedic one.
Who am I going to next?
Have we been to anyone on the back bench?
No.
Okay, you go to Dr. Saxena. Trying to remember what it was myself.
You made it really short, huh?
Yeah, I'm not sure what I got. I already know it's definitely not right.
I think you destroyed Parampara Prabhu.
This is why it's now written down.
It's good.
Okay, only once, whatever you hear, just pass it on. No conferring, just pass it on. Only once, just whatever you hear first time, pass it on. Now to Saraswati, and then Kamut will speak her oracle of wisdom. Now Kamut, in a nice clear voice, announced to us the wisdom that has been imparted in the disciplic succession.
I heard as brown mask and I don't know.
Brown mask and I don't know.
Yes.
Well, one of the words was correct. The sentence that I spoke to HG Caitanya was, the brown cat sat on the yellow mat and ate a white bowl of food. So just see, within 2 minutes...
I thought yellow food.
just see, within 2 minutes, and about 12 people, how much the original knowledge had been changed. So not only do we have to hear from the right source, but we shouldn't change the message also. No offence for anyone that's changed the message, we were deliberately trying to highlight a point. But there's 2 things: we have to hear from the right source, and we have to pass it on as it is, in disciplic succession. So Bhagavad Gita is the right source. It's coming from the original source of, the cause of all causes, Sarva Karana Karanam. And the method of passing it down without change is called the Parampara. That's what we're explaining, or what Krishna is explaining to us in this verse. Now, that's what the Bhagavad Gita is. Now, I want to ask, just to highlight a little analogy here. When some new product is created, a new Hoover or a new television or a new computer, what is simultaneously created alongside the new product?
A new concept.
A new concept, yes.
A manual?
Instructions, the manual.
A manual, instruction manual. That's what I was thinking about, yeah. So, now let me ask a question. Who uses the instruction manual when you get something new? Put your hands up. Anyone who uses the instruction manual? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4.5.
If you're stuck for something, I might, otherwise I don't.
Okay, that's an interesting point. So now let me ask another question. If you don't use the instruction manual, what are the possible scenarios you might find yourself in? Let's have some examples. If you don't use the instruction manual, what might happen?
Divorce.
Yeah, you need to read the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Yeah, if you don't read that, it might end in divorce. Okay, Eka Prabhu.
Similar, but you break the product.
You might break the product, yes. Saraswati, what were you going to say?
No, I was thinking if you get a piece of furniture from IKEA and you have to assemble it, you will, if you don't follow the instructions, you will just, everything will be all mixed up.
Yeah.
And you'll miss pieces and...
Yeah, that's true. Just recently when I went home over the weekend, then my mother, she's got it's my sister, she's got a wardrobe in the cupboard, and she said that we can have this wardrobe. It's only been used, it's been used for 1 year, and if we want it, we can take it. But at the moment, there's no instructions, and we couldn't find them online. Eventually, I think my sister has found them, but I was thinking, well, it might not be easy to assemble without the instructions. So yes, if we don't have the instructions, we may not know how to assemble it. Anything else? Lev?
If something were to go wrong, you don't even know how to go back and fix it.
Okay, so something may go wrong and then we don't know how to fix it. Yeah. What else might happen if we don't use the instruction manual?
The thing won't work.
The thing may not even work. Yeah, what else may happen if
You could break it. And
you could break it?
And you may not be covered by the guarantee.
Yeah.
We might have an electric shock as well.
You may harm yourself. Yeah. You might get an electric shock if you're not very good with electrical items. What else? Any other things that may happen if we don't use the instruction manual?
We may not be able to use it properly.
You may not be able to use it properly. Yeah, in other words, the product you've bought may have so many functions and you don't even know about them. Just like our TV at home, we've got a smart television, so it connects to the internet and all this. And we haven't really used most of the functions. And Vinay came round one evening and he's really technologically minded. So he was saying, well, you can do this, 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 this. And he started doing all these things with the television, which we hadn't bothered to find out. Like they say, you only use a fraction of your brain, So if you don't use the instruction manuals, you may only use in other words, you're not getting the full potential. You're not really utilising it to its fullest. So you can see where this analogy is going, can't you? So therefore, this universe comes with an instruction manual, the Bhagavad Gita. So the Bhagavad Gita gives us guidelines. It helps us to understand the function of this material universe and also the purpose of this material universe. So now let's ask a question. What is the function and purpose of this material world?
To rectify the fallen conditioned soul and its function, or what was the other one you said?
Function and purpose.
Purpose to perform Sankirtan Yajna.
Sounds like you've been reading the instruction manual. You're a bad audience to ask. Very good. That is the function and purpose of it all. Let's ask then some general other people's ideas. What might be the function or the purpose, or let's say the goal of life. What are other goals of life? To enjoy, yes. What other goals do people have?
Well, it should be to go back to Godhead, but we don't follow that goal.
We may not follow them, yeah. We may not follow the instruction manual, but just in general, some of people's goals.
Watch football.
To watch football. Yes, I saw on the news yesterday, because the World Cup is in Russia this year, within about a month's time. And they're worried about all the football hooliganism. And because politically right now, the tension between the British government and the Russian government, a lot of political tension, and then there was football hooliganism in the Euro Cup in France, so they're, what's going to happen? But some people, even though there's all these tensions, and even though there's going to be football hooliganism, there's still 30,000 die-hard English football fans that have so far booked their tickets, because their goal of life is to watch football. Yeah, what other goals of life do people have?
To be successful in business.
To be successful in business, yes. Anyway, you get the idea. We don't want to labour the point, but the point is everyone's got a different goal. Everyone thinks the material world has a different purpose and a different function. Why? Because one, they've not read the instruction manual, or two, they've read the instruction manual, but they're just not paying any attention to it. So therefore, and just like, for instance, if one goes to prison, right, firstly, we want to just establish what the function and the purpose of the material world is. Like HG Caitanya Vallabha and Saraswati said, actually it's to facilitate the living entities to go back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada states that in one purport. So you could say, well, that doesn't seem that it's the function, because how are we supposed to know that? It seems that the function is for us to come here to try and enjoy, like Dhananjaya said, to try and enjoy separately from Krishna. But what is the result of trying to enjoy in this material world? Suffering. That's a bit pessimistic. I'm just joking. Actually, Krishna himself, in the instruction manual, says that this material world is dukkhalayam ashashvatam. It's temporary and full of suffering. It's full of misery. So yes, simultaneously, the material world is created for us to try and enjoy, but at the same time, we're like a fish out of water. We cannot enjoy fully. We cannot fully satisfy the self because we're spiritual living entities in the material atmosphere. So we do suffer, but that suffering brings us to the point of inquiring, Tata Brahma Jigyasa. Why am I here? Why do I have to suffer? What is the real purpose of life? So therefore Prabhupada says that the material world is created to facilitate the living entities to go back home, back to Godhead. Just like the prison house. People go to prison, but what is the goal of going to prison? It's supposed to be to reform the character of the prisoner. It's not so that they can go there and have a good time. Let's think how we can improve the prison house so we can enjoy more. There's only 3 meals a day. Let's have, 11s. And we're only allowed out for 1 hour in the day. Let's create, a 3-hour lunch or whatever like that. Which sounds ridiculous, and you wouldn't be able to get away with that in the prison house. But that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to create utopia in this material world. We're trying to adjust everything to make it perfect. But the point is, there's already a perfect place. Just like the prisoners, it would be ludicrous of them to try and create the perfect society within the prison. The point is, reform yourself so you can go and live out in for the sake of the analogy, the perfect society. But the point is, for us in this material world, there is a perfect world. The spiritual world. But the spiritual world isn't just a place, it's a state of consciousness. One devotee said, going back to Godhead isn't a destination, it's a state of consciousness in this very body, in this very lifetime, if you're in the correct state of mind. What is the correct state of consciousness? In the spiritual world, it means that everything is being done for the pleasure of Krishna. There's no selfish desires. We're only thinking about how to serve Krishna and Krishna's devotees. This is the spiritual world. Of course, it is a place as well. But as much as a state of consciousness. But the point is, this material world brings one to the point of feeling dissatisfaction. There's the famous song. I've quoted it many times. It's not from the Bhagavad Gita, but there's a lot of truth in it. I can't get no satisfaction. Rolling Stones have been singing the same song for about the last 80 years. They're the Rolling Bones nowadays. So everyone knows to some degree or another we can't get any satisfaction in the material world. But how do we get it? Because they don't know about the instruction manual. They don't know about Bhagavad Gita as it is, which gives us all the answers. So we need to bring out our own song, to counteract the Rolling Stones, I can't get no dissatisfaction, we need to bring out some song glorifying the Bhagavad Gita. Actually, we have that song already. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And actually, you can carry on singing that song for eternity, and you'll never get bored of that one. That's the best song. So Krishna explains how this eternal education system is set up by him. It's originating from Krishna, and then he establishes the parampara, and this is how it's passed down. So then the knowledge is perpetuated through qualified and saintly persons who impart spiritual knowledge to the masses of people in a dynamic, in a relevant, and in a practical way. This is the purpose of the parampara, to pass down the message as it is, without adulterating it, but at the same time making it relevant to the people at the time. Just like Srila Prabhupada, he translated the purports of the previous acharyas, Baladev, Vidyabhushana, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, but he changed it. He didn't change the message, but he changed the way he presented it to make it more applicable. So in the same way, we have to take that message, and without adulterating, we have to make it relevant to the people we're speaking to. You know, you can't just repeat parrot fashion. You've got to realise the knowledge yourself and pass it on. That's the difference between Gyan and Vigyan. So we have to pass it on. So the material world is essentially like a university, wherein we rediscover our relationship with God, with Krishna, and Krishna as the creator and the maintainer of this universe. He periodically appears in this world, as we know, to re-inject spirituality back into society, to remove the material influences and to make sure that the material world is functioning smoothly, re-establishing the principles of religion, which is why Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita. Now, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport that we've read that this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, actually, Krishna is explaining the history of the Bhagavad Gita. So, Krishna first speaks the Bhagavad Gita to who? To the sun god, who is called Vivishvan. Yes. Did anyone catch, without looking in their books, roughly how many years ago did Krishna speak the Bhagavad Gita to Vivishvan? 120 million, yes. And 400,000 years ago. You have to remember these facts. You have to remember these things. One time we'll have to have a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? We'll have a Krishna conscious version in the temple. And you get some sweets. And you get
who wants some Mahaprasad?
Yeah, who wants to be a Mahaprasadarian? So 120 million, 400,000 years ago, Krishna spoke this Bhagavad Gita to the sun god Vivishvan. Why did he speak it to Vivishvan? Did anyone catch from the purport? Why did he choose Vivishvan? Why not Lord Brahma? Why not, someone else? Why not Vayu?
Because they instruct the royal order of the planet, so they instruct the citizens of their planet.
Yes. So Prabhupada quoted, and he said that the sun god, or the sun planet, is the king of all the planets. Because all the other planets are dependent upon the sun, because the sun gives heat and light. Just like right now, well, not right now, but in the last few weeks or so, we've been getting some sun again, and we feel like, oh, I'm coming back to life again, especially if you're from a hot country, like India or Mauritius or, the Balkans or somewhere like that, Belarus. You have hot summers in Belarus, right?
Same as Newcastle.
Same as Newcastle, not that hot. You get some places, like I know some places, they're very cold in the winter, but then they have hot summers, like Canada. It's a bit like that, very cold in the winter, but it has hot summers. So the sun planet is the king of all the planets. So therefore the sun god, he is the king of all kings. Just like Prabhupada means, one definition of Prabhupada means the master at whose feet all other masters sit. So there are many masters, there are many spiritual masters, but Prabhupada, he is the supreme master that all other masters are sitting at the feet of. So therefore Vivishvan, he's like the king of kings. And Prabhupada says, in the purport that the king's function is to protect the inhabitants. Kshatriya literally means to protect one from hurt. Coming from triate, which means to protect. Kshatriya, to protect. So what kind of protection are the kings or the leaders of society supposed to give? How are they supposed to protect us? Actually, they're supposed to protect us in many ways. Of course, they want to make sure that there's law and order in the land. But also, especially, they're supposed to protect the inhabitants from illusion. You know, they never put that in the manifesto, do they? For the next general election, you know, the Conservatives, we are going to protect all inhabitants from falling into Maya. We're going to make sure they chant 16 rounds a day, follow the 4 regulative principles. They read the instruction manual for the universe, and we're going to check that they apply. That's never in the manifesto, is it? It's usually we're going to put down taxes. The manifesto doesn't always quite work out usually. But the point is, the Kshatriyas or the kings, the leaders of society, they're supposed to protect the inhabitants from falling into Maya. As Prabhupada explains it, they're supposed to protect one from material bondage to lust. Because the point is, we all want to enjoy. Dhananjaya correctly said, one of the goals of life is to enjoy. And in fact, Srila Prabhupada one time gave that answer as the goal of life. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada would say different things, but one time he was asked, what is the goal of life? And Prabhupada said, to be happy. Because Ananda Maya Vyasat, we are pleasure-seeking living entities by nature. Why? Because Krishna, he is pleasure-seeking. But he's a lot better at it than we are. He's the best. He's the supreme enjoyer. He's Purushottam. We're Purushoddam. We're the lowest. He's the highest. He's the best of all men. But under illusion, we think that therefore the way to enjoy is to gratify the mind and the senses, the body, the mind and the senses. But when we engage in gratifying the senses, it brings some temporary relief. Yes, but dukkhalayam shashvatam. Ultimately, it causes our suffering and perpetuates our suffering and repeated birth and death in this material world. So therefore, yes, the Kshatriya is supposed to protect us from harm, but what is the greatest harm? Falling into illusion, birth after birth after birth after birth after birth. So therefore, Krishna instructs it to his best man. Just like if you want to get something done, you've got the person you can count on, and you think, right, if I know I want this to be done, like right now, Pratik, he's editing our videos for YouTube, and I just know if I say to Pratik, okay, Pratik, please upload this video and that video, he'll get it done, he's a good man, he's my man for editing, so okay, if you can do that. So Krishna's got his best men, people he can rely on, so he instructs it to the sun god. And what did the sun god do? When he passed it on perfectly. Who did he pass it on perfectly to? Manu, the father of mankind. That's where the word man comes from Manu. And then Manu, he passed it on to who? Ikshvaku. Did anyone catch how many years ago, roughly, that he passed it on to Ikshvaku?
2 million.
2 million. That's right. No, it was. It was 2,005,000 years ago. So Prabhupada says, and therefore the Bhagavad Gita has been existent in human society for approximately 2 million years. Sometimes we think it's been around for 5,000 years, right? We say this book of knowledge, it was spoken 5,000 years ago. And it was. Krishna re-spoke it to Arjuna. Why? Because the disciplic succession got broken. It got covered over. Just like a path, sometimes if a path isn't used much, it gets, covered over with weeds and vegetation. But if the path is being traversed every day, it keeps them all away. But sometimes people stray from the path, so the true path gets covered over again. So therefore Bhagavad Gita has to be spoken again. But in one sense, Bhagavad Gita is eternal. Because it's coming from Krishna, and it's the knowledge of how the devotee relates with the Supreme. So therefore it's eternal knowledge, but it just manifests itself periodically. Just like the sun, when the sun sets below the horizon, it doesn't mean that the sun's disappeared. It's going to manifest itself again in the morning. So in the same way, the Bhagavad Gita is eternal. But it was spoken to Vivishvan 120 million years ago. It came down into human society 2 million years ago. It became covered over and re-spoken 5,000 years ago. So therefore, the point is that this Bhagavad Gita, as it is, it has to be accepted in disciplic succession. We have to hear and we have to understand this science of the Bhagavad Gita. And not only do we have to hear and practice it ourselves, but we also have to pass it on as we've heard it. Let's not create another Chinese whispers and end up, instead of the brown cat sat on the yellow mat and ate a white bowl of food, we just got brown mask. I don't know. Brown mask, I don't know. So let us not be responsible for breaking the disciplic succession. We have that responsibility to pass it on to others. Krishna's given us that responsibility. Each and every single one of us in this room has been given the responsibility. We've been given the manual. So there's one type, you can be misfortunate, and you can be unfortunate. What is the difference? Unfortunate means you never received the manual. But misfortunate means you received it, but you didn't use it. You've missed the fortune. You're misfortunate. So let us not be misfortunate. Let's help the unfortunate become fortunate by taking on this knowledge, by hearing, Shravana, and then passing it on to others. And we're going to stop there. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is ki
Jai.
Nitai Gaura Premanande.
Hari.
So I'm going to ask just now for any reflections. Someone can maybe tell me if there's any reflections on the phone as well. But does anyone have any reflections? Something you've heard which stuck in your mind, which you're going to remember? A point that you can share with someone else, or you can share with us now? Anything at all? Did anyone remember anything I said? I know I can be boring.
We should hear it from the right source. And don't change the message. Pass it as you heard it.
Very nice. So we should hear the message from the right source and pass it on exactly as we've heard it. Good. Thank you for sharing that. Any other points? Any other reflections? Something we've heard? And the reason I do this, by the way, you might be thinking, oh, you know, and maybe you've got questions, you think, why do we have to do it? But the reason we do reflections is because it trains us to hear. Because then we're actually hearing and we're listening for something that's going to inspire us. Oh yeah, that sounds good. And then we reflect it back. Because quite often we sit in a class and we listen to it, but by the end of it, it's gone in one ear and out the other. But when we share reflections, when we're listening and we want to share it, then other people, it reminds them as well. So if there's no more reflections, that's fine.
I just want to say
Dan
one
and
thing
Jacob.
about it is
Yes.
actually this particular verse is very, very useful in establishing the authenticity of Krishna consciousness. And when people say, oh, this is just some new religion, and then, I mean, you can say, you know, you say, well, we usually say 5,000 years,
Yeah.
but you can go back further than that.
Yeah.
And it also, it's evidence of the antiquity of the human race as well. So those are some points that we can
Yeah.
put to people. You know.
That's a very nice point, because according to the traditional system, the Homo sapiens, modern humans, have only existed for 40,000 years. But that's according to our history. But, you know, history is subjective, you know. It's different in one part of the world. So in the Vedic literatures, the Puranas, we have human histories which go back millions and billions of years. So yeah, that's a very nice point. So it establishes the authenticity of Krishna consciousness and Bhagavad Gita. Great. Thank you, Bruno. Any other either reflections, or if no reflections, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, Krishna says he first instructed this knowledge to Vivishvan. Do we have any record of how or where he instructed?
Personally speaking, I'm not aware of any, other than what Krishna says here in the Bhagavad Gita, that he instructed it to him. But one thing I could say in that regard is that Krishna's pastimes are unlimited. And like, for instance, we have 12 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam on this earth planet. But I've heard from devotees that on the heavenly planets there are hundreds of cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. Because what is the Bhagavatam? It's the beautiful pastimes of the personality of Godhead and his devotees. And therefore those pastimes are unlimited. So therefore, although we only have some of the main ones. So, personally speaking, I've never heard of any situation like that. There may be, I don't know, other than what Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita.
But also I was just thinking, we say Krishna came again and spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna because the knowledge had been lost. But yet, all the Pandavas were all pure devotees, so how lost was the knowledge?
Well, that's a good point. So, one thing that comes to mind when you ask that question, that it seemed that the disciplic succession wasn't completely lost because, the Pandavas, they were all pure devotees. Prabhupada said actually there was about 120 persons on the planet who knew that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, but of course you could say that, well, they took birth on the planet alongside Krishna. Whenever Krishna appears, it's like a transcendental roadshow, like a theatre, so they're all playing parts. So they took birth with Krishna to help him perform his pastimes. But the knowledge wasn't there beforehand. You could argue like that. But you could say that another reason Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita, did Krishna speak the Bhagavad Gita just for Arjuna? No. He spoke it for everyone. He spoke it for you, he spoke it for me. So therefore Krishna makes a big thing of speaking the Bhagavad Gita. And Burijan Prabhu, he explains that when the particular point that the Bhagavad Gita was spoken, which was during the Mahabharata, and if you read the Mahabharata, it's a whole great saga. And then, it ends up, the Pandavas have been exiled for 13 years. They come back, and they're demanding they're asking for some land, and then Duryodhana says, I will not give you even enough land in which you can drive a pin. He's like, and then they're trying to avoid war at all costs, but then this huge war is escalating. Even Krishna tries to stop it, but it's going to go on. And then all the armies are there, all the greatest personalities, and just when they're about to kick off, literally, then Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita. So when you're reading the Mahabharata, at that point you're on your seat, the edge of your seat, what's going to happen? It's really got everyone's attention. Then Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita, so he's really got people's attention. Sometimes before we're speaking we say, okay, you wait till you've got everyone's attention in the class, So, okay, I want everyone to be all ears now. So everyone was all ears. So therefore Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita in that way for everyone. There may have been personalities that did have the knowledge, but the disciplic succession itself wasn't established, and Krishna came to re-establish that. Is that okay? Does that answer your question? I mean, maybe you have something else you could say about that, or someone else?
I was just
another comment? Yeah.
It's the topic we're on.
Yeah. Thank you. Nice question. Keshananapur.
Just a little reflection on that element. I heard that it's just the disciplic succession of the kings that had been broken. Because if you think of our disciplic succession, it goes back to Vyasadeva and like this. So that line wasn't broken.
That's a good point.
Just the one with kings.
Okay. That's
That's
you
nice.
think, because you can trace our line.
Yeah.
That's a nice point, yeah, because the knowledge is supposed to be passed down by the leaders.
Yeah, that line.
Nice, thanks for sharing that.
And it does specifically in the next verse, actually. It's the one that says about kings, isn't it?
Nice. Actually, that's next week's verse. That is next week's verse. So thank you. That's a nice contribution. Dhananjay?
But it does seem a bit odd that Krishna actually speaks the Bhagavad Gita to king, to someone in the royal order. You think he would speak it to a sage or saints or saints like Narada Muni or somebody like that, because you say the way we receive it, it's not. And who received it after Arjuna? Was it Abhimanyu or Parikshit, or did it continue in the royal order? That's not really, we don't really know, or I don't know anyway. We get into the cyclic succession of spiritual masters, of sages, but that doesn't seem to be what Krishna did,
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, the thing is that why did Krishna speak it to a king? But Prabhupada actually does make that point in the purport. It's because the kings, especially, they have a duty to share this knowledge with the inhabitants. Now, if you think of a sage, like nowadays, our spiritual masters, they're on Facebook and they're travelling all around the world. But in previous times, apart from Narad Muni, of course, he does travel everywhere. But otherwise, a sage may have just been on his own, in his own little ashram, or just maybe not even doesn't have an ashram, he just lives in the forest somewhere. So what capability does he have to share that with others? Of course, you could say that the sages, they were supposed to advise, the Brahmins were supposed to advise the Kshatriyas, but they wouldn't be directly involved. But I think the point that Prabhupada makes is that the kings, or the leaders, are especially meant to impart this knowledge themselves, and therefore they weren't just kings, they were Raj Rishis. They were saintly kings. You look at Parikshit Maharaj or Yudhishthira Maharaj, they weren't just kings. They were great, they were Raj Rishis. As to where the disciplic succession went after Arjuna, again, like I said, I mean, you can trace in the Bhagavad Gita, it is written down, but of course it's not a diksha parampara, it's a shiksha parampara. In other words, it wasn't necessarily from one spiritual master to his disciple, because it jumps a few generations sometimes. But again, it has to be re-established. Even when Lord Chaitanya came, he, refined the philosophy, that had come beforehand. So yeah, I can't comment too much more on that, but I understand that the reason it's imparted to the kings was because they had that function or that responsibility to share it. And there were Raj Rishis also. You want to say something?
There's another point that you're making was that the Bhagavad Gita is the instruction manual.
Yeah.
But not everybody has access to that. So, I mean, one might say that it's not fair that certain people have got access to Bhagavad Gita and they can actually pursue what we consider to be the perfection of life, whereas other people don't have that.
Yeah, that's a good point. You could argue that it's not fair. Krishna's given the Bhagavad Gita. If the function of the material world is really to facilitate living entities to go back to Godhead, why doesn't Krishna just give everyone the Bhagavad Gita? Well, the point is, for one thing, not everyone's ready. For instance, the Bhagavad Gita, the material world is created to facilitate our desire to enjoy. So the thing is, if your desire to enjoy is so strong, I mean, Krishna even says in the Bhagavad Gita, for those who are too much attached to material opulence and attached to sense gratification and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. We even notice within ourselves, we do have access to it, but I can hand on my heart say, I'm not following Bhagavad Gita as it is, fully, 100%, all times, even though I've got it. So the point is, we also have to be ready for it. So therefore, Krishna is sitting within the hearts of the living entities, and as soon as one comes to this point of being materially exhausted or dissatisfied, then they start to inquire, well, what is life all about? But it's at the time when they're ready. Krishna doesn't force anyone. He doesn't force anyone. He gives opportunities, but he's waiting. There's two birds in the tree. One little bird the other Krishna's just watching and observing, but he's waiting for the other bird to turn towards him. Then Krishna guides from within and directs towards the Bhagavad Gita, or maybe some other spiritual literature, which is a journey to reach the Bhagavad Gita. So therefore, Krishna won't interfere with our independence, and that's why, and we're not always ready for it also. Does that answer your question? Thanks, nice question. Okay, this is going to be the last one.
Krishna consciousness is extremely broad. I mean, Narada Muni, his instruction to Mugwari the hunter was just please kill them stone dead.
Yeah.
Don't leave the creature suffering. And at the time, Mugwari, although he's a pure devotee now, like he was so fallen, he wasn't even able to follow that instruction.
Yeah.
It's not that he could see, he didn't preach to him Bhagavad Gita straight away, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
Good point.
You know. So it's
Yeah.
a very
Yeah.
broad and deep thing, Krishna consciousness.
That's a really nice point, that, you know, you can't just give everyone everything all at once, you know, just like you don't teach primary school children Einstein's theory of relativity. Okay, here's 2 + 2, you know, try that first, and, you know, if they're working okay with that, then they can progress. So therefore, we also have to have a progression of consciousness before we can understand Bhagavad Gita. Nice point, thanks, Boo. Okay. We'll stop there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Friday Night Gita ki jai. Bhagavad Gita as it is ki jai. Nitai Guru Pramanande.
Grace Caitanya Vallabha Prabhu ki.
Jai. Guru back to Brinda ki jai.
Was that?
So we can, they're my notes. No, that can just go on the chart. So we can ask Shama Priyamasaji to come and chant Hare Krishna for us. You didn't even on it. No, in fact, yeah, stop it, and I'll put it on
As a separate thing.
Please.